There is no other sport and no other venue like the UFC where a head kick or knockout can settle a fight. It's the home of the world's best fighters, as well as the stage where their crazy big personalities reign supreme. But just like any other sport, there are some very controversial people that cause fireworks. Stick around till the end of the video to find out some of the most controversial UFC fighters and what they have done to land them in this position. First up is Colby Covington, who has become increasingly more controversial as the years have passed. It's hard to imagine now, but Colby Covington, who is now often regarded as the UFC's most outspoken fighter, was once a prospect who largely went unnoticed due to a lack of marketable personality. Covington was 7-1 in the UFC by late 2017 and had defeated his contender Dong Hyun Kim, but he was still the welterweight division's forgotten man, probably due to his wrestling-heavy approach and lack of charisma. When Covington traveled to Sao Paulo, Brazil to face Brazilian superstar Damian Maia, everything changed. To defeat the veteran, Colby "Chaos" Covington put in possibly his best performance in his career, but it was his post-fight outburst that really placed him on the map and made him into one of UFC's most well-known fighters. Covington called Brazil a dumping ground before calling the crowd in Sao Paulo filthy animals, prompting them to boo the octagon and attempt to pelt him with trash as he walked backstage. After placing security at Covington's hotel to protect him from the angry locals, the UFC had to adjust their plans for a Covington/Rafael dos Anjos bout in 2018, shifting it away from the Rio de Janeiro-based UFC 224 owing to safety concerns. Next up, we have George St. Pierre. St. Pierre has to be one of the most successful UFC champions on our list, but he's no stranger to controversy. In the past, St. Pierre's failure to complete bouts has cast a shadow on his time as welterweight champion. Some supporters protect him, while others constantly throw him under the bus. Whatever camp you belong to, it's no secret that St. Pierre has struggled to complete fights in the UFC, despite the fact that other notable competitors have no such issues. But aside from his questionable tour as one of the UFC's most promotable fighters, St. Pierre's second-round battle with BJ Penn remains the single largest blemish on the Canadian's otherwise near-perfect record. St. Pierre was accused of greasing, meaning that he was able to gain a significant edge over Penn on the ground. Of course, the champion denied any wrongdoing, but the video and picture evidence that surround the UFC fighter during the fight seemed too important to miss. You are truly missing out if you haven't seen it. Some fighters refer to him as Grease St. Pierre for this very reason. Well, Chael Sonnen, to be specific. Now we have Rampage Jackson. When it comes to Rampage Jackson and his UFC past, there are a lot of things that should and are considered problematic. First of all, Jackson was detained on suspicion of felony careless driving, which definitely tainted his professional name. Additionally, he was very controversial as a coach on The Ultimate Fighter. Jackson's decision to abandon MMA in order to pursue a career as a Hollywood movie star may have irritated some, but you can't blame him. Rampage Jackson doesn't pull any punches in any situation. He's a cunning veteran who enjoys talking trash, barking at his foes, and referring to himself as God's street soldier. He's a one-of-a-kind individual. His illustrious MMA career makes him an obvious choice for our most controversial UFC fighter list. Next on our list is Anderson Silva. While Silva himself is not that controversial, he has had some very questionable moments and fights, one of which includes his bout against Chris Weidman at the UFC 162 event. Looking back, it's hard to think about, but this was the start of Anderson Silva's demise. Silva had a 17-bout winning run before the fight. He'd won the middleweight belt a record 10 times in a row. He had not only not lost in over 7 years, but he also made his victories look routine and easy. Furthermore, he'd started taunting opposites in the middle of a battle by dropping his hand and daring them to punch him. He was so confident that he would never lose. But Silva was instantly tagged on the chin and knocked out cold when he attempted the same trick against Chris Weidman. It was a surprise upset at the time. Silva later lost their rematch after breaking his leg during the bout, and he hasn't won since. He did win against Nick Diaz, however. This was later revoked due to Silva testing positive for drug use. Very unfortunate. Up next is Jon Jones. Jon Jones is not just one of the greatest fighters the world has ever seen, but he's also the most controversial fighter in UFC history. Jones has seen it all, from failed drug tests to prison visits. Jones first made news in 2012 for all the wrong reasons. When he was detained for drunk driving, DWI, Jones slammed his new Bentley Bentley Continental GT into a power pole in Birmingham in New York State. A failed drug test before his UFC 182 fight with Daniel Cormier was his second major scandal. Things got much worse for him when he was engaged in a hit-and-run accident a few months later. After running a red light, Bones collided with two vehicles, one of which was carrying a pregnant woman. He ran away, but returned a short while later to claim the money he had left behind. Jones compiled with an arrest warrant and was released after posting a $2,500 bond. Jones was removed from his fight with Ovince St. Preux after failing another drug test at UFC 200. He won the light heavyweight title at UFC 214 by defeating Daniel Cormier. However, he was stripped of his belts later after testing positive for steroids. And that's not all. Jones was charged with battery in relation to an altercation with a waitress in 2019, and he was arrested for DWI and gun possession in 2020. Next is Conor McGregor. Now, this next one comes as no surprise. Conor McGregor, like Jon Jones, is one of the most popular yet controversial competitors in the UFC. He became the megastar he is today thanks to his brutal trash-talking and performances inside the octagon. But he's also been in the spotlight for the wrong reasons. McGregor invaded the Barclays Center in Brooklyn after the media day and damaged the fighter bus, which contained Nurmagomedov and a few other competitors. Before UFC 223, which was headlined by Khabib Nurmagomedov, in retribution for Khabib attacking his friend Artem Lubov earlier, McGregor did it. An arrest warrant was served on the Irishman, who eventually surrendered and was released. When McGregor raced into the Bellator cage in 2017 to celebrate his teammate Charlie Ward's victory over John Redmond, which had yet to be deemed official by referee Mark Goddard, he wreaked havoc. When Goddard attempted to stop McGregor, he shoved him and spat ugly insults at him. In his hometown of Dublin, McGregor also assaulted an elderly man in a bar after the victim allegedly refused to sip his proper 12 whiskey. He has now purchased the bar and has barred the individual from entering. In addition, the Irish superstar was accused of sexual assault, but the charge was eventually dropped. Now we have Nick Diaz. Another very questionable fighter in the UFC is Nick Diaz. After defeating McGregor by a fourth-round submission at UFC 229, Khabib Nurmagomedov stepped out of the cage and attacked McGregor's entourage, igniting a large fight post-match. The Diaz brothers, on the other hand, were the ones who blazed the road. Nick Diaz's iconic Nashville Brawl was the most popular in MMA before the Khabib-McGregor Brawl. In 2010, when Jake Shields defeated Dan Henderson for the title, Jason Miller entered the ring to challenge the champion. The Diaz brothers were obviously enraged at Mayhem for ruining Shields' big moment. The situation quickly devolved into anarchy. Additionally, to add to his controversial rap sheet, Nick had a fight with Anderson Silva in 2015 where he was defeated by a unanimous decision. However, after the bout, both competitors failed drug tests. Therefore, the fight was declared a no contest. Diaz ultimately tested positive for marijuana, while Silva tested positive for steroids. The Stockton native was first sentenced to a 5-year suspension, but his sentence was eventually reduced to 18 months. Diaz defeated Takanori Gomi years before he battled Anderson Silva, while he was still apparently using cannabis, so it seems as though in the past 5 years, the UFC have become a lot stricter on their no acceptance of any kind of substances, even weed. Next, Chael Sonnen. The final fighter on our list is the controversial Chael Sonnen. Sonnen is the CEO of Being a Bad Guy, and he isn't afraid to play the role. Sonnen, who is known for being one of the best trash talkers in the game, has also made headlines for the wrong reasons. Sonnen was found guilty for money laundering in 2006. The former UFC title challenger held an Oregon real estate license and committed to committing wire fraud. He was given a 24-month probationary period, his license was suspended, and he was fined $10,000. Sonnen was defeated by Anderson Silva in the 5th round of UFC 117, but not before he had dominated the Brazilian for 4 rounds and was on his way to a unanimous decision victory. If the loss wasn't bad enough, Sonnen also failed a drug test and received a 1-year suspension. His sentence was eventually reduced to 6 months. And there you have it, everything you need to know about some of the most controversial UFC fighters to date and what they did to land this title. Thanks for watching.